the marriage and kidnapping of Rukmiṇī. So everybody get your seat belts fastened so that we can better not have to fall over when we hear about the kidnapping. It's really, truly fascinating. Unfortunately, I had to excerpt some of it because I have to be finished by 1 o'clock. Because that's the time that prasadam will be generally served. So I hope you'll all stay for the complete talk, even though it's been excerpted. However, I do have a gift for all of you. The gift is this, is that because I had to take out some of the pastime, I want you all to have it. Now, I have an audiobook ministry, and I have this particular pastime, the kidnapping and marriage of Rukmiṇī, on an audiobook. And all you have to do at the end of today's talk is give me your email address, and you can just write it right on the back of this here. I'll take care of it, and I assure you, after I finish this at 1 o'clock, by 2 o'clock, you'll have it in your computer. So you'll be able to hear the entire pastime. And it has music, it has sound effects, it has various voice characterizations, which I'm known for, and therefore it will even be, I hope anyway, better than the one I'm doing in a few minutes. Why is that? Because it was done with preparation. It was like a drama. It was like a stage play. So therefore it has a certain amount of practice before it. So without any further ado, let me simply mention, again, we cannot have talking going on while it is being spoken, because devotees here will not be able to hear it all, okay? So I'm asking for your respect in that regard. If you'd like to talk, I welcome that, but outside. So please take it outside. Children outside who cannot control their voices. Okay? We love your children. We want your children. But when they scream, outside. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to mention, just before I even begin the pastime, as follows. No, I'm wearing these. I can't speak with this. The threads get in my teeth. They don't taste very good. The Queen of Dwarka is always next to her beloved Krishna, also known as Dwarkadish. Rukmiṇī was the daughter of King Bhishmaka, ruler of the province of Vidarbha. Just as Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, Rukmiṇī is the supreme goddess of fortune, Mahalakshmi. According to the authority of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the expansion of Krishna and that of Srimati Radharani are simultaneous. Krishna expands himself into various Vishnu Tattva forms, and Srimati Radharani expands herself into various Shakti Tattva forms, female, by her internal potency, as Srimati Radharani expands herself into various Shakti Tattva forms by her internal potency. So there are multi-forms of the goddess of fortune, and they all derive from Srimati Radharani. From her comes all these different goddesses of fortune. So, now we'll begin the what I'd like to do for at least 5 minutes is the Jaya Radha Madhava prayers. Why? Because they set the stage for the mood, for the feeling, for the uplift, and for the understanding of this wonderful pastime I'm about to read. So, how many of you know the Jaya Radha Madhava prayer? Wonderful. Would you please join me? First I'll say it, and then you'll say it. And say it loud and strong. Let Krishna know you really love him. And your expression of your love will be an example of that. Okay? Just get this set. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Come on. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Radha Madhava. Come on, loud and strong. Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasoda Nandana Vajitana Ranjana. Yasoda Nandana Vajitana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvajakacharya Asatara Sacha Sri Srimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. And all glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you very much for coming. It's a great pleasure and a great privilege for me to share this information, this knowledge, this nectar, this bliss with everyone here. And I hope Krishna will give me the ability to speak it in such a way that we will all feel the blessedness of the occasion of Rukmiṇī being married to Krishna and the big difficulty, trouble, and problem that she had to go through to enable or to achieve this. Good things don't always come easily. Most of the times they come with difficulty. And here's a very good example. Rukmiṇī was the princess of Vidarbha. She had heard about Krishna from various princes, various saints, various sages. And when she heard about him, his abilities, his looks, his figure, all the things, his qualities, his virtues, all she wanted to do was be with him. There was no man that struck her heart so deeply as when she heard about Krishna. Remember, she never saw him, but just hearing about him was enough to get her heart jingle-jangling. It was, this is the man for me. And it was. She is the goddess of fortune, and the goddess of fortune is eternally linked with Lord Sri Krishna. So, therefore, it was time for them to come together. She was only about 14 years old. In India in those days, 5,000 years ago, marriage at 14 was quite common. However, generally, the husband and wife did not live together until a few years later when they would be ready to actually try to conceive children. So, but their marriage was fixed, and the girl never had to think at that age, who am I going to get married to? So now what happened here was that Rukmiṇī, as I've just said, was in love with Krishna. But her brother, Rukmiṇī, he was not in love with Krishna. In fact, he considered Krishna his enemy for one reason or another, which I won't go into. It's not germane to the story. So he engaged a king named Shishupal, who was an enemy of Krishna, so that she would have him. Sometimes persons regarded Krishna, although he was quite kingly. When he went to Mathura, he began to express all the different kingly activities. So Krishna was raised when he was a child on a farmland. He was a cowboy. And sometimes warriors would berate him and call him a cowboy or a cowherd, which is not very high for a kshatriya. Kshatriya is a warrior, and warriors are very proud. Anyway, so what happened is Rukmiṇī, he arranged for this marriage. Now, when Rukmiṇī heard about it, she was devastated. She didn't want to marry Shishupal. She wanted Krishna. Well, how was she going to get Krishna? Well, she sent a letter, not an email. They didn't have emails in those days. So she sent a letter to Dwarka, where Krishna lives. And the letter was so beautiful and so touching, so moving, so uplifting and steering to Krishna. When he read it, he said, this woman, if she can't have me, she's ready to commit suicide. That's how much she loves me. And Krishna also knew very much about Rukmiṇī. Of course, Krishna is Lord. He's omniscient. He knows everything. Knowing everything, he knew that she was the person, the woman whom he had to marry. So, therefore, it was his obligation, if he wanted to marry her, to go to Kundana, where Rukmiṇī lived, and kidnap her. That's what warriors did. They fought for the woman that they loved. It was even done a few hundred years ago in different European countries. So anyway, what happened was that Rukmiṇī said in the letter, if you don't come soon, then I'm captured, and this Shishupal will have me. So please don't let this happen. It will be a terrible tragedy for my life. So the wedding was announced, and various princes and visitors came to Kundana to hear and to see Rukmiṇī. It was known all over the world that Rukmiṇī was one of the most beautiful women in the world, from head to toe. And many warriors were hoping and wishing, hoping against hope that maybe she would just forget about Shishupal, and since they would be sitting on their horses, that she would select them in their egotistical pride. So, I start the story now, and kindly listen intently. All the princes and visitors who came to Kundana for the marriage had assembled outside the temple to see Rukmiṇī. The princes were especially, excuse me for a drink of water. It is water, by the way. Anybody want to test it? The princes were especially eager to see her because they all actually thought that they would have Rukmiṇī as their wife. Struck with wonder upon seeing Rukmiṇī, they thought she was especially manufactured by the Creator to bewilder all the great chivalrous princes. Her body was well constructed, the middle portion being thin. Her high hips were adorned with a jeweled locket. She had pink lips, and the beauty of her face was enhanced by her slightly scattered hair and by different kinds of earrings. The bodily luster and beauty of Rukmiṇī appeared as if painted by an artist, perfectly presenting beauty following the descriptions of great poets. Rukmiṇī's breasts are described as being somewhat high, indicating that she was just a youth, not more than 13 or 14 years old. Her beauty was specifically intended to attract the attention of who? Yes, of Krishna. Although the princes gazed upon her beautiful features, she was not at all proud. In other words, as beautiful as she was also trained in humility, in being very humble, as I said, very modest, and not at all thinking that she was greater than great, even though she was. But that's the nature of a truly humble person. They don't think they're at all great. They think they're just insignificant and unimportant. And thinking that way, they always give credit to others as being more beautiful to them than they are, even though they may not be. So that's what is meant here. Now, she was not at all proud. Her eyes moved restlessly, and when she smiled very simply, like an innocent girl, her teeth appeared just like jasmine buds. So the children, oh, thank you very much. I was just going to ask you to kindly remove the child. Yeah. Her teeth appeared just like jasmine buds. Expecting Krishna to take her away at any moment, she proceeded slowly toward her home. Her legs moved just like a full-grown swan, and her ankle bells tinkled mildly. The chivalrous princes assembled there were so overwhelmed by Rukmiṇī's beauty that they became almost unconscious and fell from their horses and elephants. Full of lust, they hopelessly desired Rukmiṇī's hand, comparing their own beauty to hers. Srimati Rukmiṇī, however, was not interested in any of them. In her heart, she was simply expecting Krishna to come and carry her away. As she was adjusting the ornaments on a finger of her left hand, she happened to look upon the princes and suddenly saw that Krishna was present amongst them. Although Rukmiṇī had never before seen Krishna, she was always thinking of him. She thought of him in terms of his attributes, his qualities, his virtues, his looks, what she heard about them. Thus she had no difficulty recognizing him amongst the princely order. Krishna, unconcerned with the other princes, immediately took the opportunity to place Rukmiṇī on his chariot, marked by a flag bearing the image of whom? Anybody remember? Garuda. Yeah, that's Vishnu's carrier. He then proceeded slowly without fear, taking Rukmiṇī away exactly as a lion takes a deer from the midst of jackals. Meanwhile, Balaram, that's Krishna's brother for those who don't know, appeared on the scene with the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty. So if there was going to be any trouble, any difficulty, any argument about Krishna kidnapping Rukmiṇī, there was going to be a big fight. And the fight would be between the the dynasty of the Yadus and also the dynasty of Rukmiṇī. Now, Jarasandha, who was known as a very great warrior, great in the sense that he was very able, but not very kind or sweet or generous. Jarasandha, who had many times experienced defeat by Krishna, roared, "How is this? Krishna is taking Rukmiṇī away from us without opposition. What is the use of our being chivalrous fighters with arrows? My dear princes, just look, we are losing our reputation. He is just like a jackal taking booty from a lion." So this ends that particular chapter, and we move into another chapter entitled "Krishna Defeats All the Princes and Takes Rukmiṇī Home to Dwarka." Jarasandha and all the other princes were very angry at Krishna for having kidnapped Rukmiṇī. Struck by Rukmiṇī's beauty, they had fallen from the backs of their horses and elephants. But now they began to stand up and properly arm themselves. Picking up their bows and arrows, they began to chase Krishna on their chariots, horses, and elephants. To check their progress, the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty turned and faced them. Thus, terrible fighting began between the two belligerent groups. The princes opposing Krishna, who were led by Jarasandha and were all expert in fighting, shot their arrows at the Yadu soldiers, just as a cloud splashes the face of a mountain with torrents of rain. Gathered on the face of a mountain, a cloud does not move very much, and therefore the force of rain is much more severe on a mountain than anywhere else. The opposing princes were determined to defeat Krishna and recapture Rukmiṇī from his custody, and they fought with him as severely as possible. Rukmiṇī, seated by the side of Krishna, saw arrows raining from the opposing party onto the faces of the Yadu soldiers. Think about it. Krishna is in a chariot, okay? Rukmiṇī is next to him, and pretty close, I'm sure, because she could either fall out of the chariot, which was not going to happen, and Krishna had his arm around her. That was already the marriage. When a man touched a woman in ancient India in that manner, she was considered married. And of course, she wanted the protection of Krishna against the arrows that were raining down towards her. And they fought with him as severely as possible. Rukmiṇī, seated by the side of Krishna, saw arrows raining from the opposing party onto the faces of the Yadu soldiers. In a fearful attitude, she looked upon Krishna's face, expressing her gratefulness that he had taken such a great risk. He's risking his life, by the way, in one sense, from an ordinary point of view. From the point of view of one who knows who Krishna is, there's no risk whatsoever, because no one can kill God. That just happens to be the fact. So, her eyes moving, she appeared sorry. And Krishna, who could immediately understand her mind, encouraged her with these words, "My dear Rukmiṇī, don't worry. Please rest assured that the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty will kill all the opposing soldiers without delay." As Krishna was speaking with Rukmiṇī, the commanders of the Yadu dynasty's soldiers, headed by Lord Balaram, that's his brother, older brother, who is also known as Sankarshan, as well as by Gada, not tolerating the defiant attitude of the opposing soldiers, began to strike their horses, elephants, chariots with arrows. As the fighting progressed, the princes and soldiers of the enemy began to fall from their horses, elephants, and chariots. Within a short time, millions of severed heads, decorated with helmets and earrings, had fallen on the battlefield. The soldiers' hands were severed along with, these guys really went for blood. It wasn't just pussyfooting. So, the soldiers' hands were severed along with their bows and arrows and clubs. Arms were piled upon arms, thighs upon thighs, and horses upon horses. Similarly, other animals, such as camels, elephants, and asses, as well as infantry soldiers, all fell with severed heads. When the enemy, headed by Jarasandha, found that they were gradually being defeated by the soldiers of Krishna, They thought it unwise to risk losing their armies in the battle for the sake of Shishupal. Shishupal wasn't even fighting. He should have been, because it was the woman that he were supposed to marry or was hoping to marry that he should have been defending against Krishna. His fight should have been, but what happened was that Shishupal himself, as it says here, should have fought to rescue Rukmiṇī from the hands of Krishna. But when the soldiers saw that Shishupal was not competent to fight with Krishna, remember, Krishna is one of the most competent fighters. He knows everything about fighting. He's the Supreme Lord. All knowledge emanates from him. All information comes from him. All ability comes from him. He says this in the Bhagavad Gita, I am the ability in man. He's also the creator of the moon and the sun. Rukmiṇī, so as we say here, Shishupal himself should have fought to rescue Rukmiṇī from the hands of Krishna. But when the soldiers saw that Shishupal was not competent to fight with Krishna, they decided not to lose their armies unnecessarily. Therefore, they ceased fighting and dispersed. Some of the princes, as a matter of etiquette, appeared before Shishupal. They saw that Shishupal was discouraged, like one who has lost his wife. His face appeared dried up, kind of like a prune. He had lost all his energy, and all the luster of his body had disappeared. They addressed Shishupal thus, "Our dear Shishupal, don't be discouraged in this way. You belong to the royal order and are the chief amongst the fighters. There is no question of distress or happiness for a person like you, because neither of these conditions, distress or happiness, is everlasting. Take courage. Don't be disappointed by this temporary reversal. After all, we are not the final actors. As puppets dance in the hands of a magician, we are all dancing by the will of the Supreme Lord, and according to his plan alone, we suffer distress or enjoy happiness." This comes through our karmic reactions. Okay? We should therefore be equipoised in all circumstances. So this is what we teach here, to keep your mind peaceful, because at any moment, difficulties, trials, tribulations, problems could occur. Although in the beginning, the princes had been full of hope for success in their heroic action, after their defeat, they could only try to encourage Shishupal by flattering words. Thus, Shishupal, instead of marrying Rukmiṇī, had to be satisfied with the flattering words of his friends, and he returned home in great disappointment. The kings who had come to assist him, also disappointed, then returned to their respective kingdoms. The whole catastrophe of the defeat was due to the envious nature of Rukmiṇī's elder brother, Rukmiṇī. Having seen his sister forcibly taken away by Krishna after he had planned to marry her to Shishupal, Rukmiṇī was frustrated. So after Shishupal, his friend and intended brother-in-law returned home. So after Shishupal, his friend and intended brother-in-law, returned home, Rukmiṇī, very much agitated, was determined to teach Krishna a lesson personally. He called for his own soldiers, a military phalanx consisting of several thousand elephants, horses, chariots, and infantry. And equipped with this military strength, he began to follow Krishna to Dwarka. So, to show his prestige, Rukmiṇī promised all the returning kings, "You could not help Shishupal marry my sister, Rukmiṇī. But I cannot allow Rukmiṇī to be taken away by Krishna. I shall teach him a lesson. Now I am going to follow him." He presented himself as a big commander and vowed before all the princes, "Unless I kill Krishna in the fight and bring back my sister from his clutches, I shall not return to my capital city, Kundana. I make this vow before you all, and you will see that I shall fulfill it." After thus vibrating all these boasting words, Rukmiṇī immediately got on his chariot and told his chariot driver, pursue Krishna, go get him. He said, I want to fight with him immediately. This cowherd boy has become proud of his tricky way of fighting with Kshatriyas. So that was really a slur on Krishna, calling him a cowherd boy because he was raised as a cowherd. But when he went to Mathura, he became a soldier, full Kshatriya. Of course, he knew everything about fighting. Nonetheless, he showed it little by little that he was among the greatest of fighters. This cowherd boy has become proud of his tricky way of fighting with Kshatriyas. But today, yes, today, yes, today, I with my sharp arrows shall teach him a very good lesson. Thus, this unintelligent man, Rukmiṇī, ignorant of the extent of the strength and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, voiced his impudent threats. In great stupidity, he soon stood before Krishna, telling him repeatedly, hey, stop, Krishna, stop for a minute, fight with me, come on, fight. After saying this, he drew his bow and directly shot 3 forceful arrows against Krishna's body. Then he condemned Krishna as the most abominable descendant of the Yadu dynasty and asked him to stand before him for a minute so that he could teach him a good lesson. You are carrying away my sister, just like a crow stealing clarified butter meant for use in a sacrifice. You are proud of your military strength, but you cannot fight according to regular principles. You have stolen my sister. By the way, that was allowed in those days. Kidnapping was proper for warriors, not for non-warriors. In other words, men could fight for the woman that they wanted to be married to. And that was actually many women, they felt that this was a great honor to be fought over and to be obtained in that manner, because after all, how many women are fought over and how many men will risk their life just to have a particular wife. So then he condemned Krishna as the most abominable descendant of the Yadu dynasty and asked him to stand before him for a minute so that he could teach him a good lesson. You have stolen my sister. Now I shall relieve you of your false prestige. You can keep my sister in your possession only until I beat you to the ground for good with my arrows. Pretty dumb person. Lord Krishna, after hearing Krishna has already had many battles and won many of them, and he, for his own personal egotistical reasons, is disregarding, ignoring, not even thinking about the battles. For example, Krishna defeated the Jarasandha 17 times on the battlefield. And he's talking so big, so high, so great, so mighty. So, Lord Krishna, after hearing all these crazy words from Rukmiṇī, immediately shot an arrow and severed the string of Rukmi's bow, making him unable to use another arrow. Rukmiṇī immediately took another bow and shot another 5 arrows at Krishna. Being attacked for the second time, Krishna again severed Rukmi's bowstring. Rukmiṇī took a third bow, and Krishna again cut its string. This time, to teach Rukmiṇī a lesson, Krishna shot 6 arrows at him, and then shot another 8 arrows, killing 4 horses with 4 arrows, killing the chariot driver with another arrow, and chopping off the upper portion of Rukmi's chariot, including the flag, with the remaining 3 arrows. Good archer. Rukmiṇī, having run out of arrows, took assistance from swords, shields, tridents, lances, and similar weapons used for fighting hand to hand. But Krishna immediately broke them all in the same way. Being repeatedly baffled in his attempts, Rukmiṇī took his sword and ran swiftly toward Krishna, just as a fly proceeds towards a fire. But as soon as Rukmiṇī reached Krishna, Krishna cut his weapon to pieces. This time, Krishna took out his sharp sword and was about to kill him immediately. But Rukmi's sister, Rukmiṇī, understanding that this time Krishna would not excuse her brother, fell down at Krishna's lotus feet and in a very grievous tone, trembling with great fear, began to plead with her husband. Rukmiṇī first addressed Krishna as Yogeshvar. Yogeshvar means one who is possessed of inconceivable opulence and energy. Krishna possesses inconceivable opulence and energy, whereas Rukmiṇī's brother had only limited military potency. Krishna is immeasurable, whereas her brother was measured in every step of his life. Therefore, Rukmiṇī was not comparable even to an insignificant insect before the unlimited power of Krishna. She also addressed Krishna as the God of gods. She also addressed Krishna as, well, I just said that. There are many powerful demigods such as Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, Chandra, and Varuna. But Krishna is the Lord of all these gods, whereas Rukmiṇī's brother was not only an ordinary human being, but in fact the lowest of all because he had no understanding of Krishna. He thought he was an ordinary man. Thinking he's an ordinary man, he went to fight with him, as it's mentioned here, like a fly runs into a fire. In other words, a human being who has no conception of the actual position of Krishna, God, is the lowest of human society. Then, why? Because such a person, he's seeing God as equal to himself instead of far beyond himself. And when you know God is far beyond yourself, you can pray to the Lord, you can beg the Lord, you can gain guidance from the Lord, you can get help from the Lord. And when you get that help, it helps you in your daily activities and duties and all of the things that we need to take care of. In other words, a human being who has no conception of the actual position of Krishna is the lowest in human society. Basically, he's a person of sense gratification. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending, that's the extent of his life. But a person who knows Krishna knows that the real purpose of life is to surrender to Krishna, to give one's all to Krishna, because Krishna is the source of our being. We would have no form without Krishna. Krishna is the original conceiver of it, and we have our being as a result of Krishna. We have our eating, sleeping, mating, defending. All these are enabled by Krishna. There are so many people, like right now, we're all listening to this, we're hearing, but there are many people who are not hearing, or there are many people who are not seeing, or many people who can hardly taste their food. All these are done by the assistance and help of Krishna, who exists in each and every one of our hearts. In the heart is the soul, who we are. And just beside the soul is the supreme soul. And so it is through the agency, the help of the supreme soul living right here, who knows exactly what you need. He knows exactly what you are. He knows what your ambitions are. And he's giving us all an opportunity to achieve those things through the attempts that we make to develop in our different capacities and our different talents. So, continuing over here, she also addressed, Rukmiṇī first addressed Krishna. I already said that, I'm sorry. Krishna possesses inconceivable opulence and energy. Continuing over here, she also addressed Krishna as the God of the gods. There are many powerful demigods, such as Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, Chandra, and Varuna, but Krishna is the Lord of all these gods. They're not equal to him. Whereas Rukmiṇī's brother was not only an ordinary human being, but in fact the lowest of all because he had no understanding of Krishna. In other words, a human being, as I said this before, and it's good to say it again, who has no conception of the actual position of Krishna, thinks of him as just an ordinary human being, is the lowest in human society and can hardly achieve anything of any magnitude. Then Rukmiṇī addressed Krishna as Mahabhuja, which means one with unlimited strength. She also addressed Krishna as Jagatpati, the master of the whole cosmic manifestation. In comparison, her brother was only an ordinary prince. In this way, Rukmiṇī compared the position of Rukmiṇī, her brother, with that of Krishna, and very feelingly pleaded, begged her husband, please don't kill my brother. She was very attached to him. Some of you may have brothers, and it may have been a difficult situation, and you don't want to see him hurt or injured or killed or harmed in any way. So she was the same way. Even though she knew that her brother was acting wrongly, because her brother wanted her to marry Shishupal, and she didn't want to marry Shishupal. So her brother wanted to go against her will. So in spite of that fact, she was very compassionate, very gentle, very loving, and stopped Krishna from killing her brother. So we can see she has some very wonderful qualities. So she pleaded with her husband not to kill her brother just at the auspicious time of her being united with Krishna, but to excuse him. In other words, she displayed her real position as a woman. She was happy to get Krishna as her husband at the moment when her marriage to another was to be performed, but she did not want it to be at the loss of her elder brother, who, after all, loved his young sister and wanted to hand her over to one who, according to his own calculations, was a better man, which was false. While Rukmiṇī was praying to Krishna for the life of her brother, her whole body trembled, and because of her anxiety, her face appeared to dry up, and her throat became choked. And due to her trembling, the ornaments on her body loosened and fell scattered on the ground. In this manner, when Rukmiṇī was very much perturbed, she fell down on the ground, and Lord Krishna immediately became compassionate and agreed not to kill the foolish Rukmiṇī. You can see he loved the woman he was about to marry. He didn't want to disappoint her, didn't want to upset her, didn't want to ruffle her. And so he went along, even though he had every right to kill him, since Rukmiṇī was attempting to kill Krishna. But Krishna still let him go. But at the same time, he wanted to give him some light punishment. He tied him up with a piece of cloth and snipped at his mustache, beard, and hair, keeping some spots here and there. So his head looked a little like polka dots, circles here, 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 here. It didn't look like a good barber job, definitely. While Krishna was dealing with Rukmiṇī in this way, the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty, commanded by Balaram himself, broke the whole strength of Rukmiṇī's army, just as an elephant in a pond discards the feeble stem of a lotus flower. In other words, as an elephant breaks the whole construction of a lotus flower while bathing in a reservoir of water, the military strength of the Yadus broke up Rukmiṇī's forces. So this is where it's excerpted slightly. And as I said, anyone who wants to get the whole story, just give me your email before you leave, and I'll email the whole audio story to you, and you'll get it that way. So, continuing on. As far as Rukmiṇī was concerned, his promise was not fulfilled. He lost. He was defeated. Nor was his mission successful. He had come from home with his soldiers and military phalanx to defeat Krishna and release his sister. But on the contrary, he lost all his soldiers and military strength. He was personally degraded and very sorry, but by the grace of the Lord, he could continue his life to its fixed destination. Krishna was being very compassionate in this situation. I mean, to a warrior who attacked him with such sarcasm and such hostility, such animosity, normally he would have been dead long ago. But Krishna simply fulfilled the wish of his coming wife, or the sister of Rukmiṇī. So, on the contrary, he lost, I just mentioned that, because he was a kshatriya, a warrior, he could remember his promise that he would not return to his capital city, Kundana, without killing Krishna and releasing his sister, which he had failed to do. Therefore, he decided in anger not to return to his capital city, and he constructed a small cottage in the village known as, anybody know that village name? It's called Bojakata, where he resided for the rest of his life. After defeating all the opposing elements and forcibly carrying away Rukmiṇī, Krishna brought her to his capital, Dwarka, and then married her according to the Vedic ritualistic principles. After this marriage, Krishna became the king of the Yadus at Dwarka. On the occasion of his marriage with Rukmiṇī, all the inhabitants were happy, and in every house there were great ceremonies. The inhabitants of Dwarka city were so much pleased that they dressed themselves with the nicest possible ornaments and garments and went to present gifts according to their means to the newly married couple, Krishna and Rukmiṇī. All the houses of Yadupuri, Dwarka, were decorated with flags, festoons, and flowers. Each and every house had an extra gate specifically prepared for this occasion, and on both sides of the gate were big water jugs filled with water. This is considered auspicious, favorable. The whole city was made fragrant by the burning of the incense, and at night there was illumination from thousands of lamps which decorated every building. Excuse me, we're almost finished, by the way, in case any of you are getting hungry. The friendly kings of the Kurus and the Pandavas were represented by Bhishma, Dhritarashtra, the 5 Pandava brothers, King Drupada, King Santardana, and Rukmiṇī's father Bhishmaka. Because of Krishna's kidnapping Rukmiṇī, there was initially some misunderstanding between the two families. But Bhishmaka, king of Vidarbha, being approached by Sri Balaram and persuaded by many saintly persons, was induced to participate in the marriage ceremony of Krishna and Rukmiṇī. Although the incident of the kidnapping was not a very happy circumstances in the kingdom of Vidarbha, kidnapping was not an unusual affair among Kshatriyas. Kidnapping was, in fact, current in almost all their marriages. Anyway, King Bhishmaka, that's Rukmiṇī's father, was from the very beginning inclined to hand over his beautiful daughter to Krishna. In one way or another, his purpose had been served, and so he was pleased to join the marriage ceremony. Even though his eldest son was degraded in the fight, it is mentioned in the Padma Purana, that's a scripture, that Maharaj Nanda and the cowherd boys of Vrindavan joined the marriage ceremony. Kings from the kingdoms of Kuru, Srinjaya, Kekaya, Vidarbha, and Kunti all came to Dwarka on this occasion and met with one another very joyfully. The story of Rukmiṇī's being kidnapped by Krishna was poeticized, and professional readers recited it everywhere. All the assembled kings and their daughters especially were struck with wonder and very much pleased upon hearing the chivalrous activities of Krishna. In this way, all the visitors as well as the inhabitants of Dwarka city were joyful to see Krishna and Rukmiṇī together. In other words, the goddess of fortune was now united with the Supreme Lord, the maintainer of everyone, and thus all the people felt extremely jubilant. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 54th chapter of Krishna. Krishna defeats all the princes and takes Rukmiṇī home to Dwarka. All glories to Rukmiṇī Devi ki. All glories to Krishna ki. All glories to all of you, and I thank you for listening so patiently. Now, I don't know if there are times for questions, but what I did want to say is, for those of you who want to hear the whole pastime, all you have to do is, here it is. I have a pen put your email address on it, and you'll receive an audiobook with music, sound effects, professional acting, and everything else, and much more interesting than what I could do here just alone. Thanks so much. Okay, so we can just pass that around. If those of you want to go and get prasadam now, you're welcome to do so. Did anybody have any particular question here? Okay, then the paper it's moving around here. So please come and you can put your email address down. I'll try to get it to you before even 2 o'clock, because I'll be leaving in a few minutes with you. Again, thank you all. My pleasure. Thank you for, well, someone else may. Did anybody else want the, leave me there? Oh, it's moving around. Oh, they got their own. Okay, well, I'll take it. Yeah, leave it here if we need one. Thank you so much. My pleasure. Hare Krishna. Have a wonderful day. Jai. Thank you so much. Jai. My pleasure meeting with you. Anybody wants to, just a moment. Yeah, thank you. Do you want to give me your email address? Where is the card? Who's got the, can somebody get, does somebody have the, oh, it's over there. Okay, as long as we know where it is, we can keep it going. It's over there. Please write your email address down, and I'll send you an audio book of that. So, yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. My great pleasure. Oh, thank you for listening. I definitely